August 14, 1878, Dry Creek, Wyoming Territory. The sun was a white blaze over the town square when she fell. One moment, the stagecoach had pulled away in a cloud of dust, and the next, Rosalind Maynard staggered toward the town well, her bonnet slipping from damp hair, her boots dragging through the dirt. She reached for the pump handle, missed, and crumpled to the ground. Victor Langston had just come from the livery, sweat on his brow and saddle oil on his fingers. He dropped the bucket he carried when he saw her go down. "Hey! You all right?" he shouted, boots thudding fast on the dry packed earth. She did not answer. Victor dropped to his knees beside her. Her skin was hot, flushed with heat and travel, and her lips were cracked. Dust clung to the hem of her dress. He lifted her carefully, one arm beneath her knees, the other braced around her back. "I got you," he said low, steady. "You're all right now." She weighed next to nothing. He carried her to the shade beside the mercantile and signaled to old Mrs. Tally inside, who fetched a basin of water and a cloth. Victor sat with the stranger's head in his lap, brushing damp curls from her brow. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Mrs. Tally leaned down, squinting. "Per girl's dressed like a bride." Victor nodded. "Mail order, looks like." The woman stirred, then letting out a soft, dry sound. Her eyes blinked open, pale blue and confused. "Where?" she whispered. "Dry Creek," Victor said. "You fainted. Do you know your name?" "Rosalind," she rasped. "Rosalind Maynard." Victor dipped the cloth and pressed it to her brow. "You came in on the stage?" "Yes." "From Missouri." She tried to sit up but swayed. He steadied her with one hand on her back. "Easy," he said. "You need water first." She drank from the tin cup Mrs. Tally handed her, small sips. Her fingers trembled. "I was supposed to meet someone," she said after a moment. "A man named Thomas Granger. We'd written for months. He sent for me." Victor's jaw tightened. "That name don't belong to anyone in town." Rosalind blinked. "But his letters, he said he lived here. That he'd meet me at the well." Mrs. Tally sighed sharply. "Granger was run out of town last winter. Real piece of work. Took money from 3 families, then vanished." Rosalind's face went pale. "No." Victor stood slowly and helped her to her feet. "You are not going to fall again," he said. "Come on. Let's get you inside. Out of this heat." He led her across the street to the boarding house, where Miss Lorna showed them to a room. Rosalind sat on the edge of the bed, dazed, while Victor stood by the door, hat in hand. "I was supposed to start a new life," she said quietly, staring at her empty hands. "I sold everything back home. There's nothing left to go back to." Victor's voice was calm, steady. "You are not alone here." She looked up at him. Her eyes were full of tears, but she blinked them back. "I do not even know your name." "Victor Langston. I run cattle just west of town." She gave a small nod. "Thank you, Victor." He tipped his hat. "Get some rest, Rosalind. I will check in on you tomorrow." Outside, Victor stood for a long moment in the sun, jaw tight. He had not expected the way her voice would stick in his chest like that, or the way her fingers had clung to his arm when he lifted her. He had not planned on any of this. By morning, Rosalind was sitting upright with a plate of eggs and bread in her lap. Victor brought her coffee from the cafe and sat across from her on the porch bench. "I wired the Marshal in Cheyenne," he said. "Asked if they have any record of Granger. Might not help, but it is something." "Thank you," she said, both hands cradling the mug. He studied her face. She had washed and brushed her hair, and though she still looked pale, there was a quiet strength in her posture now. "What will you do?" he asked. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I had hoped. I was meant to be a wife. To build something with someone. I suppose I was a fool." Victor shook his head once. "You are not a fool." He was the liar. She looked at him then, a bit longer than before. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." Victor's voice dropped low. "Because no one should be left alone like that." Rosalind looked down, voice soft. "I was alone when I left Missouri. My parents passed 2 winters ago. I had no brothers, no sisters, just a trunk and a hope." Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I know what it is to lose everything. My wife died 4 years back. Fever took her quick. Left me with an empty house and a saddle that did not feel right no more. Rosalind's eyes filled, but she did not look away. I am sorry, she whispered. He nodded. I do not say that for pity. Just so you know I understand. She reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing his. It was the smallest touch, but Victor's hand turned under hers, his calloused palm steady beneath her trembling one. I do not want to be a burden, she said. You are not, Victor said. You needed help. You got it. Rosalind looked down at their joined hands. He did not pull away. That evening, he brought her out to the ranch. Just for the air, he said. Just to see something green. The land stretched wide, golden under the fading sun. Cattle grazed in the distance, and a windmill clicked slow in the breeze. Rosalind stood beside the fence, arms wrapped around herself. It is beautiful, she said. Victor watched her. It is better now. She turned. You do not have to say that. I do not say things I do not mean. She dropped her gaze, smiling a little. He stepped closer. I do not know what you were hoping to find here, but I know what I see when I look at you. Rosalind's breath caught. I see someone strong. Someone who did not give up even when she was left with nothing. Someone who deserves better than letters from a man who never meant to show up. She looked up as shining. Victor took a breath. I do not know what you want, Rosalind. But if you are willing to stay, really stay, I would like the chance to show you what it could be like. She stepped closer, her hands reaching for his. I think, she said softly, I would like that very much. Victor lifted her hand to his chest, holding it there like it belonged. And in the quiet stretch of Wyoming land, under a sky streaked with gold, something new took root, steady, sure, and real. The late summer air carried the scent of sage and cattle dust as Victor stepped down from the buckboard and offered Rosalind his hand. She took it without hesitation, her gloves tucked into the waistband of her skirt and her eyes scanning the low ranch house ahead. It was a modest structure, unpainted pine boards, and a wide porch shaded by a slatted overhang, but it stood solid against the wind. A clothesline stretched between two fence posts, fluttering with shirts and linens. You built it yourself? She asked, stepping down to the packed dirt. With help from a neighbor and a winter's worth of blisters, Victor said, his voice quieter than usual. Wasn't meant for just me, not at first. But it ended up that way. Rosalind didn't look at him right away. She was watching a chicken pecking near a trough, its feathers ruffled by the breeze. I'm not afraid of hard work, she said. Victor nodded once. Didn't think you were. They walked slowly toward the porch, the wood creaking beneath their boots. Inside, the house was still cool from the night, the windows open just enough to let the morning wind move through. The floorboards bore years of wear, and the table bore the marks of a branding iron someone had set there without thinking. A single book lay open on the mantel, its spine cracked, the pages yellowed. Victor set his hat on a hook near the door. You hungry? A little, she said, her fingers trailing along the edge of the table. But I'd rather see the rest first. He led her through the narrow hallway. The bedroom door stood open, the bed neatly made with a quilt of faded blues and greens. A single rocking chair sat in the corner beside a small window that looked out over the grazing pasture. Rosalind's eyes lingered on the chair. Did she sit there often? Victor's hand gripped the doorframe. She embroidered. Said the light was best in the mornings. Rosalind stepped into the room but didn't touch anything. I'd like to keep it just as it is, if you don't mind. He looked at her, surprised. You don't have to. I know, she said, turning to face him. But I think she'd want you to make space by choice. Not forget her because you're told to. Victor's jaw worked slightly, but he gave a slow nod. All right. They didn't speak for a while as they stepped back into the kitchen. The kettle hissed gently on the stove. Victor poured them each a mug, the smell of chicory rising in the air. They sat across from one another at the table, quiet but not uneasy. I meant to ask, Rosalind said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Do you know if the town has a school? Not anymore, Victor said. The last teacher left in spring. No one's taken the post yet. She looked thoughtful. I taught for 2 years before. Before I answered that advertisement. You'd consider starting again? If there are children needing it, yes, she said. I miss it. The rhythm of it. Watching someone's eyes when they finally understand a thing. Victor leaned back slightly, studying her. You're not what I expected. She raised a brow. What did you expect? Someone who'd break easy. Rosalind smiled, and this time it wasn't shy or uncertain. I've done my breaking already. What's left is tempered. He set down his cup and folded his hands. There's a spare room here. Meant it for family once. You're welcome to it. Just until you decide. I've already decided, she said gently. I want to stay. His throat worked before he spoke. You sure? I am, she said. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because something in me settled the moment I stepped onto this land. And because you didn't ask anything of me, not once, not even when you had every right to. Victor stood slowly and reached for her hand. She let him take it. I don't move fast, he said. I don't make promises unless I mean to keep them. Good, she said, rising with him. Then we'll take our time. But we'll take it together. Outside, the wind shifted, bringing the scent of hay and creek water. 2 crows passed overhead, wings silent against the pale sky. The ranch stood quiet around them, the land wide and waiting. Victor opened the front door and stepped aside. Come on, he said. I'll show you where the wildflowers grow come spring. Rosalind walked through that doorway, not as a guest, but as someone beginning again, with her feet steady, her hands open, and her heart ready to root in the dry Wyoming earth. The dry wind carried a faint scent of burnt mesquite as Victor led Rosalind along a narrow ridge above the creek. Evening light picked out the ochre layers in the bluff wall, and the hush between them was peaceful, not strained. Below, willows leaned into the water's edge, their leaves trembling where the current moved slow around their roots. Rosalind tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes following a pair of mule deer across the far slope. Do they always come down this close? She asked. Most nights, Victor said. They feed where the grass is thickest. Water draws everything out eventually. She nodded, then looked down at the basket looped over her arm. I hope they won't mind us gathering from their patch. Victor knelt beside a low sprawl of wild mint, the leaves dense and dark beneath the fading sun. They've got enough. These won't be missed. Rosalind crouched too, her skirt brushing the dry soil, and began picking carefully, fingers gentle. I used to help my mother with this sort of thing, she said after a while. She kept jars of dried herbs in the cellar. Claimed mint could cure most things if you brewed it strong enough. Victor glanced over. You believe that? I believe it helped her feel steady, she said. That counts for something. They worked in silence for a few more minutes. The only sounds the rustle of leaves and the faint splash of water below. When the basket was half filled, Victor stood and offered his hand to help her up. She took it, her grip firm despite the dirt beneath her nails. And once she was steady, she didn't let go right away. I've been thinking about the schoolhouse, she said as they started back toward the wagon trail. It's empty, isn't it? He nodded. Been locked up since spring. I'd like to fix it up, she said. If I'm going to stay here, I want to be useful. And children shouldn't go without learning just because their town's too small to matter on a map. Victor looked at her for a long moment, the sun catching the edge of her cheekbone. You'd make a hell of a teacher, he said. I was one, she replied. I still am. That part of me didn't vanish just because someone lied to me. Victor's voice was quiet. Nothing about you seems to vanish. They reached the wagon and she climbed up without help, setting the basket beside her. He joined her on the bench, the reins loose in his grip as he looked out across the land. My brother's boy, he said suddenly. He's 9. Lives east of here with his mother's family. They never had much use for books. I tried sending for him once. Thought he'd be better off here. What happened? They said no. Claimed I wasn't fit to raise him alone. Rosalind was quiet for a few breaths. Do you still want him here? I don't know what kind of life I could offer, he said. Not then. She turned toward him. But it's different now. Victor's hands tightened around the reins. It could be. She didn't press further. Instead, she looked out toward the horizon where the sun was dipping low behind the hills. The light turned the grass bronze and a hawk wheeled overhead, sharp against the sky. "Do you think they'd reconsider?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "If I rode again. If I had more to offer than a roof and a name." The wagon jolted gently forward as he clicked to the team, the road winding them back toward the house. The silence between them now held something new, not uncertainty, but possibility. When they reached the yard, she stepped down and paused to shake the dust from her skirt. The last of the sun lit her hair in a dull gold halo, and Victor found himself standing still, watching her without meaning to. "You'll need shelves once I start drying these," she said, lifting the basket. "I'll build whatever you need," he said. She met his eyes, and something passed between them, not a question, not yet, but the shape of one, forming slow as water-carved stone. Inside, she set the basket on the counter and began sorting the leaves onto a clean cloth. Victor leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. "You have a way of making a place feel fuller," he said. Rosalind didn't look up. "And you have a way of making it safe enough to try." Victor crossed the room, stopping just behind her. He didn't touch her, but the space between them was warm with nearness. "I won't stand in your way if you want more than this," he said. "You deserve a life that opens wide." She turned then, slowly, and looked up at him. "I'm not looking for more," she said. "I'm looking for deeper." He breathed in, slow and steady, and for the first time since she'd arrived, there was no trace of caution in his eyes. "Then stay," he said. "Not just in the house. In the life." Rosalind's hand found his without hesitation. Their fingers folded together like they'd done it 100 times before. "I already have," she said. And somewhere beyond the walls, the wind moved through the grass, steady and sure. Victor drove the fence posts deep into the earth, the hollow thump of the maul steady against the wind. His shirt clung to his back, damp with sweat, and the sun set high enough to bleach the tops of the grasses silver. He paused, leaning his weight on the handle, and looked toward the house. Through the wavering heat, he saw Rosalind step out with a tin basin and a cloth tossed over one arm. She crossed the yard at an easy pace, her skirts gathered in one hand, the other holding the basin steady. When she reached the gate, she hooked it with her elbow and nudged it open. Victor straightened. "You didn't need to bring that," he said. "I know," she replied, setting the basin on a flat rock beneath the shade of a stubby cottonwood. "But you'll blister through both hands if you keep at it without cooling off." He set the maul aside without argument, dusted his palms, and joined her in the patch of shade. She dipped the cloth, wrung it out, and held it up. "Let me," she said. Victor didn't speak. He only lowered himself to sit on the rock beside her, knees bent, hands resting loosely on his thighs. Rosalind pressed the damp cloth to the back of his neck, slow and deliberate, her fingers brushing the edge of his collar. "No one's looked after me like this in a long time," he said after a while. She folded the cloth over his forearm, smoothing it flat. "Then it's long overdue." He studied her face, the way the sun caught in her lashes, the dust on her cheekbone. "You've taken to this land quicker than most." "I think it's the land that's taken to me," she said. "It's quiet, but it listens." Victor's brow creased. "What do you mean?" "In Missouri," she said, wringing the cloth again, "everything was noise and obligation. You couldn't breathe without someone asking after your intentions. Here, the days come one after the other. No one expects more than what you're willing to give." He nodded, slow. "It's an honest place. Doesn't mean it's always kind." She looked down at her hands. "Kindness doesn't have to be soft. Sometimes it's just someone staying beside you when they don't have to." Victor reached for her hand, his grip calloused but careful. "I'm not going anywhere, Rosalind." Her fingers tightened around his, and she gave a small nod. "I know." They sat like that until the breeze shifted and a hawk's cry echoed from the far ridge. Victor stood and stepped back toward the post, but this time he laid the maul across the fence rail instead of lifting it. "We got time," he said. "No need to rush this line." Rosalind tilted her head. "You mean the fencing?" He looked back at her, one brow raised. "I don't." A faint smile lifted her mouth and she rose to her feet, brushing her palms down her apron. "There's something I'd like to show you." Victor followed her back toward the house, past the barn and the low stone wall behind it. She led him to a small clearing where she'd placed a row of wooden boxes, each one filled with carefully turned soil. Tiny green shoots had begun to push through the surface. "You planted these?" he asked. "3 days ago," she said. "Spinach, carrots, and a few herbs. Miss Lorna gave me the seeds." Victor crouched beside the nearest box. The shoots were young, still bowed from the struggle through the dirt, but alive. "You didn't mention it. I wanted to be sure they took," she said. "I didn't want to promise anything I couldn't make grow." He looked up at her, the sun behind her shoulders turning her hair the color of dry wheat. "They'll come up strong. You've got the hands for it." Rosalind crossed her arms, resting them lightly against her waist. "I'd like to add more. Maybe beans. Maybe strawberries if the soil agrees." Victor stood slowly. "You'll have help. Whatever you want here, we build it together." Her eyes met his and didn't waver. "That's what I want. Not just a place to rest. A life that's ours." He stepped forward, close enough to see the faint line of sweat at her temple. "You already have it." Rosalind reached up and brushed her hand against his chest, over the worn fabric of his shirt. "Then let's stop tiptoeing around it, Victor." His hand came to rest at her waist, the pressure light but unyielding. "I've been waiting for you to say that." She leaned into him, not hesitating, not unsure. His other hand rose to cradle the side of her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Their lips met in the quiet heat of the afternoon, not rushed, not timid, but with the steadiness of something long understood. When they pulled apart, Rosalind didn't drop her gaze. "I'll wire your nephew's family," she said. "Tell them what kind of home he'll have here." Victor's voice was roughened by something he didn't try to name. "He'll be proud to call you kin." Rosalind stepped back, brushing her skirt down. "I'll put on a pot for supper. You finish the fence tomorrow." Victor watched her walk toward the house, her movements sure and unhurried. The wind caught the scent of turned soil and the faint sweetness of mint. He turned back to the field, the maul still resting on the rail. There was time now, time to build it all. The letter arrived on a gray morning, folded twice and sealed with rough wax. Victor found it tucked among the seed sacks Miss Lorna had delivered from town. The handwriting unfamiliar, but the return mark unmistakable. White Bluffs, Nebraska. He stood in the barn's open doorway, dust on his boots and the letter held steady in his hands. Rosalind crossed the yard, brushing hay from her apron, her expression unreadable until she reached him. "Is it from them?" she asked. He nodded once. "Her father wrote. Said they talked it over. Said if there's still a place for the boy, they'll send him by the end of the month." Rosalind didn't smile. She didn't need to. She reached for his hand and held it between both of hers, her palms warm against his calluses. "Then we'll be ready," she said. They spent the next days in quiet preparation. Victor cleared out the small room off the kitchen, where bundles of old tack and a rusted plow blade had long gathered dust. Rosalind scrubbed the windows until the glass shone clear, then stitched a curtain from leftover muslin, adding a row of tiny leaf shapes along the hem. Neither of them spoke much about what was coming, but the rhythm of their days shifted deeper, more deliberate, like a field being furrowed for something long-lasting. On the second Sunday, Rosalind walked into town with a letter of her own and returned with a key in her pocket. "They've agreed," she said, breath catching slightly as she stepped into the kitchen. "I sent word to every family with children. Classes start next Monday." Victor stood from the table where he'd been oiling the hinges of the boy's new trunk. His eyes moved over her face, slow but sure. "You built something," he said. "So did you," she replied. That night, they sat on the porch beneath a sky gone deep with stars. The lantern between them flickered gently, casting light across the boards and the tops of their boots. Victor leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "I wasn't planning for any of this," he said. "Not after what I'd already lost." Rosalind folded her hands in her lap. "Neither was I. But I keep thinking, he went on, about how things feel now. About the sound of your steps in the morning. Your voice reading aloud. The way you don't look away from hard things. She turned toward him, the lantern's glow catching the curve of her smile. What do you want, Victor? I want you beside me, he said. In every season that comes. I want this house to be yours as much as mine. Not just for the boy. Not just for convenience. Because I want to build the rest of my days with you. Rosalind reached out, her hand resting over his heart. You already are. He stood then, slowly, and offered his hand. She took it. He led her inside, not as a guest or as someone passing through, but as the woman who'd grown roots in this place, as much a part of it as the wind and the cottonwoods. They were married the next week in the open air behind the house, with Miss Lorna standing beside Rosalind and the pastor from Cheyenne riding in just for the service. The neighbors brought what they could: fresh butter, wildflowers, a fiddle tune that drifted into the hills. Victor wore his cleanest shirt and stood tall without speaking much, his hand never far from hers. Rosalind wore a soft blue dress and tied her hair back with a ribbon Victor had left on her pillow that morning, folded neat beside a sprig of mint. When Thomas arrived, small for his age, with a wary face and a stitched bag over one shoulder, he stepped down from the stage and looked first at Victor, then at Rosalind. It took only one afternoon before he was riding the fence line beside Victor and helping Rosalind sort beans in the kitchen, his shoulders loosening by the day. That first spring, the garden pushed up full. The spinach came in thick, the carrots sweet. Rosalind's schoolhouse filled with the sound of chalk and laughter, and Victor added a second lean-to the barn where Thomas kept a lamb he'd helped deliver himself. In the quiet hours after supper and before the lamps were turned low, Victor would sit on the porch with Rosalind's hand in his. They didn't speak much then. They didn't need to. The sky stretched wide above them and the land held them steady. They had made something lasting. They had made something whole.